Hi everyone, welcome to our Making Meaning story this week. It's called Charlie Needs a Cloak. Today you're going to be working on answering questions to understand the story. So this story in particular has some vocabulary words you might not be familiar with. This story was written a long time ago. It also goes through the process of making a cloak, which you might not be familiar with. The story and pictures are written by Tommy DePola. He's a very famous author. And look at that, there's a vocabulary word right on the front. So let's take a look. A cloak is a loose coat with no sleeves. So imagine a coat that goes over your shoulders, but there's no armholes. Kind of like you're wearing a blanket. All right. I want you to think about what you're gonna do today to be a good partner. So go ahead and tell your partner all the things you're gonna do today to be a good partner. Hopefully you mentioned something about looking at them when they talk and staying quiet and taking turns and listening to each other and coming up with retelling together. All right, so let's see. In this story, you're gonna learn how Charlie uses wool from his sheep to make cloth. All right, so this has instead of a title page, it has kind of like a prelogue or a little bit of what's happening in the story. It says, Charlie was a shepherd. A shepherd is a person whose job is looking after sheep. Charlie was a shepherd. He had a cozy house, a big hat, a crook, and a crook is a long stick with a hook at the end. You see him holding it right there? So he has a crook and a flock of fat sheep. So a flock is just a group of animals. Different animals have different names for when they're in a group, but a sheep, when there's a bunch of sheep together, it's called a flock. But everyone said, Charlie needs a cloak. That's an interesting way to lead into the title again. Poor Charlie. Looks like the sheep really likes him. He really needed a new cloak. That thing is really ratty. All torn. Oh, can you see why it's torn? So, in the spring, Charlie sheared his sheep. Look at that picture. What do you think sheared might mean? It means to shave or trim the hair off. He washed the wool and carded the wool to straighten it out. All right, so he carded the wool. That means he brushed it. Do you see that special brush he has right there? To make it straight. That means it. So it doesn't have any wrinkles in it. He's even gotten some laying on top of the sheep. Then Charlie spun the wool into yarn. See this tool right here? If you've ever seen Sleeping Beauty, you might be familiar with that. Or Rumpelstiltskin. All right, so spun the wool into yarn means you twisted the wool to make yarn. You guys know what yarn is, right? You can buy that at the craft store and use that just to knit. All right. There's been a lot of vocabulary words, but I want you to think back to the beginning and I want you to tell your partner what's happened in the story so far. Go ahead and pause me if you need to. I'll give you a little bit of time. All right, so pause me if you haven't finished because I'm going to start going. We found out Charlie was a shepherd and then he had a flock of sheep. And then he had a really old, ratty, tattered cloak. So he starts to make one, right? He sheared his sheep, then he washed the wool, then he brushed it to make it straight. All right, let's keep going. Charlie wanted a red cloak, so he picked some pokeweed berries during the late summer and boiled them over a fire. Then Charlie dyed the yarn red in the berry juice. See that like cauldron there? He picked the berries and then boiled it in the pot to make the color. Nowadays, we're really lucky. If we need a fabric color, we can just go to the store and buy it. But back a long time ago, when they didn't have that sort of thing available, they would make it colors from flowers and berries. You can see he's dipped it in there and it's turning red. After the yarn was dry, Charlie put the strands on a loom. Let's find out what a loom is. A loom is a machine used for weaving cloth. Those sheep sure are pesky and lovable. He looks very annoyed. And every fall evening, he wove the yarn into cloth. So when you weave, you pass the strings of yarn over and under each other. So look at his awesome machine. And look at the cloth that he's making. Looks like that sheep's already got it in its mouth. Charlie put the cloth on the table and cut it into pieces. The illustrations make me laugh. That guy's so frustrated with the sheep. He pinned the pieces together. Oh, this is like a step-by-step. So we cut them and he's pinning them together on the floor. And then he's put it on this thing. And it looks like he might be thinking about how long he needs it to be. Or maybe he's looking at the sheep. And sewed them. All right. What other things does Charlie do with his cloak? We left off that he had washed it and straightened it and dyed it. What other things has he done? I think dyed it. I may have just given you an answer. I'm trying to look to where we stopped last time. Where we stopped last time, he had sheared and washed and straightened it, and he was spinning it into wool. So I did give you an answer. But what other things has he done with the wool? Go ahead and pause and tell your partner right now. All right, I'm gonna keep going. So he dyed it, right? And then he put it in the loom. Then he was weaving it. And after it was cloth, he cut it and pinned the pieces together. And then the very last thing he did was sew it. So it's important to ask questions because this process is complicated and long. So hopefully you were able to come up with a few of those. Let's keep going. And then when winter came, Charlie had a beautiful new red cloak. Hopefully you didn't see that, right? All right. Ooh, and on the last page, it goes through the steps. Shear. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the steps. These are vocabulary words. Shear, to clip the wool from a sheep. Card, to untangle wool with a comb or brush. Spin, to twist wool into yarn. Weave, to twist thread into cloth. Sew, to fasten together thread. And then a cloak is a coat without sleeves. All right. So let's answer some comprehension questions. The first one is, why does Charlie need a new cloak? Tell your partner right now. Did you say it was all tattered and ratty? Yeah, it was falling apart. All right, here's your question for your discussion board. What do you think will happen to Charlie's new cloak? What do you think might happen to it? Head over to the discussion board and let me know what you're thinking. And I will see you back tomorrow for more work with retelling. Bye, guys.